Hi everyone. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there this morning. This is Ryan Orrock, and but Jason invited me to have a little intro anyway. So here it is. Here I am. You guys are in for a treat because Jason is not only a transformational force in the field of sales and marketing. I know this because he's worked with some of the top sexual healers and people in our area of relationships and intimacy that you've heard of, like Destin Garrick and Triambika. He's helped them launch gigantic, massive businesses to really change the world. So if you want to do that, you're in the right place. But what Jason also does is he teaches profound skills from his tool set. And he's got this toolbox for sexual healers he's going to be sharing with you all today. And he's going to be sharing amazing techniques to help solve the issues that you have with your clients. And I can just say I've been working with Jason. It's been amazing. It's been transformative. Ask him for his free exploratory session. You will not regret it because I got so much clarity just out of him helping me see what I wanted and then helping me go for it. But anyway, I could say a lot of stuff about Jason. He's the most ethical guy I know. He is an amazing fellow. He's a lot of fun. He's going to be sharing a different side of himself with you guys today, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it a lot. So, with that, enjoy the webinar.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being on this call. This is we're going to go a little bit deeper than we did in the last one. I'm not sure how many people were on the last call, or how many of you watched the video who weren't on the call, or did both. Hopefully, did both. But this one's going to take what we did, build on that, and go deeper. And we're going to talk about both shame and trauma today. Sexual trauma can be anything from, an errant spanking, that wasn't intentionally, but it hit the genitals and the young child's mind, associated pain with that, or it could be as serious as, ongoing systemic molestation or anywhere in between. So when I talk about trauma, it could mean any of those things. It really means traumatic for them, not for us from a more objective, even if empathetic perspective. A couple things about this platform. Please use the chat window to communicate with me. You're all on mute by default. And that's just the most efficient way to handle it, especially when we have a bunch of people on the call. You have the power to unmute yourself if you need to ask a question, or if we need to go a little bit deeper. I may ask you to unmute yourself if you ask me a question. I need more information about it. And with that, let's just get right into it. The purpose of today's call is to give you really more effective ways to help your clients, or help yourself. But really, this is for practitioners. Some of you may not be practitioners. A couple of people asked me if they could be on the call anyway. I said, sure, of course. Everybody's dealt with these kinds of things. It's sort of one thing we all have in common as human beings is some type of emotionally traumatic event, even if it's being born. So, and also to talk about the course in December. I'll always be talking about what's next. I'll also be saying very little about that. It'll be 3 to 5 minutes at the end. And I want to make sure that it is. I see. Yes, daylight savings time. That's great. Anyway, we'll be talking about the course in December. It's a 2-day course for practitioners. Really add to your toolbox and teach you how to do this stuff that you'll see me doing in the demo. And that's, another part of it is to really just expose you to the quality of the material. And also just I forget, because I've been doing it for 20 years now, the power of some of the tools that are out there and actually effectively, rapidly resolving issues that some people go to therapy for years or forever. Or some people have it that you'll never really be over that. You never really get complete about it. Or, that you're sure it's resolved, but then there's other layers. And some of it's true to some degree, especially the layers part. But for those of you who know the raw version of my life story, the idea that I would be happy and successful really is not something that you would look at on paper and say, "Oh yeah, this guy's got to be happy," because of all the the events that other people would project as traumatic, I'll say. So those are the primary purposes of the call. Of course, also to accelerate the liberation of the planet. That's what we're all here for, I think. And the best way to get everything out of the call that you can is really two things. Just ask questions and stay to the end. Ask as many questions as possible. There'll be a longer Q&A at the end, which, usually there's pretty good material that comes out of there. Also, I'm going to bribe you to stay to the end. That's just, there's going to be something that's a gift for you for two people who stay on the call. So stay for that, if for nothing else. Stay for the free shiny thing. I'm going to have fun today, too, by the way. Ryan's not here. He recorded something, and he wanted me to share it as an intro, but we're just going to put it in the recording. So with that, are there any questions before we get started? By the way, this won't be as long as it says it is. It won't be 2 hours. I don't think. Might be 90 minutes tops. Are there any questions before we get started? Okay. So why you? Why sexual healers? And in my view, sexual healers are doing the most important work available right now for in the domain of personal development, healing, transformation. Other stuff's fantastic. It's all worthwhile. But this is so fundamental to people's relationships. The very thing that defines most people. When they move through the world, are they alone or not? Are they single, divorced, married? Do they have lovers? Are they dating? Are they looking for a lover? It's pretty much just runs people's lives, and sadly often determines their level of happiness or their level of fulfillment with life. And we don't want to encourage that, by the way. We want them to be internally, they have their own internal thermostat for happiness. And it's impossible to get away from the fact that most of our joys and challenges come from relationships and how those patterns mesh well. By the way, there's a workshop right next to me going on that I was unaware would be here. It sounds like they just had a break. So it's a networking workshop, so it might be very loud. And hopefully this continues to work. Anyway, that's what we call a flexibility drill. For those of you who've been around me long enough, know what a flexibility drill is. This is a flexibility drill. So that's why you guys, sexual healers are doing the most important, in my opinion, the most profound work, but also the most fundamental for people for their lives. And I want to help you be more effective. That's all there is to it. Whether that's in your business skills, which many of you are still acquiring, or whether that's in your efficacy with actually resolving things in clients' nervous systems, so you don't have to keep doing somatic body work with them for 2 years when you could do something in an hour or two. Then you can get on to some more fun stuff. So why me? There's a longer version of this in the previous recording. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on it. But just very briefly, most of you know me through evolutionary sales or some other practice building things. So for some, this is sort of out of left field. For people who know me really well, it sort of wasn't. They were relieved that I was finally just it's like the alcoholic. He was the last to know. Everyone else knew they were an alcoholic. I was sort of the last one to say, okay, I'll start teaching stuff around sexuality and start, specifically addressing sexual healers. So that's happening. But just so that it's always been going on. My sexual education began at the age of 8 with a conversation with my dad. And some of you may have read that post. If you haven't, it's on the bio page of the sex.evolveco site, which you'll see a link to at the end. And feel free to read that. There's other stuff in there as well, other points, and there's a lot that I left out of the written version. But for me, the important thing is that two things really. One is I believe and have the philosophical grounding that we should all have whatever kind of relationships we want to have. That people are free to choose, and you can also decide not to be in that relationship. And there's just freedom and choice. Whether that means your sexual orientation or preferences or fetishes, or whether that means, this particular person, and whether or not you want to be business partners and lovers with them. and whether or not that's a good choice. And for those of you who haven't realized it yet, you cannot unilaterally have a relationship, but you can unilaterally end one. So anyway, The Ethics of Liberty is one of the most transformative books I've ever read, of many I've been lucky to have read, by Dr. Murray Rothbard. And it really is, how to have a community or a society where you would behave in a way, what structures would we need to set up so that we wouldn't need force. We wouldn't need the government to come in and, put a gun to our head and say, you can't do that. Or you should do this. And it's a very clear book. And while I disagreed with a lot of Rothbard's conclusions, I couldn't find any reason. First of all, his logic is flawless. But second of all, the sum total of my objections were something like, because I don't like it. I don't like your conclusion. It wasn't, I had no valid argument. Changed my perspectives on a lot of things. The other one, of course, many of you have heard about, when I was in prison, somebody doing life handed me a book called Awaken the Giant Within. That was 24 years ago. Yeah, I've been out of prison longer than I was. I've reached the halfway point of my life. I was glad when that happened. Such ancient history. Oh, right. I'm supposed to tell you guys. I had a habit, a hobby really, stealing brand new sports cars off car lots, and I wasn't hurting people, just so that you know. All right. I'm going to talk about all this stuff. Ken Wilber's systems, testing positive for HIV, my marriage, the two of us getting into the BDSM community, me having two very long periods of celibacy. All this is involved in, my sexual education, including my dad explaining to me that clitoris, the G-spot, perineum, anal sex, all at the age of 8, and then a more expanded conversation at the age of 13. And the environment, while my father was many things that were unpleasant, the one area he excelled in was this, and boy, he nailed it. So I was very fortunate to have that experience. And then practice, the truth is it's a feedback-driven system. And if you're in connection, then you'll know what is working and what isn't working. But that's for another course. So the experiment with mainstream myself is over. Some of you will be horrified. Most of you will be relieved. Some of you will find it provocative, and hopefully it'll just be fun. For me, this is a return really to my core. I knew in my early 20s that what I should be doing in the world is liberating people sexually. Not by having sex with them, although that certainly can happen, but by really through self-acceptance. I mean, it all always boils back down to, it seems, ego development and self-esteem. Self-acceptance, which ties directly into shame. So here it is. It's simple now. Liberation. That's it. That's the purpose. So let's talk about shame and trauma and the relationship between the two. Shame is just, it's kind of complex, but it's also relatively simple to resolve. I'm asserting that it has 3 primary components. Imprints from your parental figures or authority figures, somebody who, scolded you for something or told you not to touch yourself there because it's dirty, or, or did something to you, they molested you, or, whatever. And then traumatic events, things that happen to you. And that could be, again, anything like I described in the beginning. It could be anything from a spanking to rape. I've certainly worked with people who've been raped, men and women. And that's really, when you've got somebody who can't be touched in a certain part of their body, it does limit, because it's not just that one spot. It's them, being on guard once you get close to that spot. There's a tension that will occur. It's sourced in that original event, the imprint in their nervous system, and we get to go back and clear that out. And here's the one that we'll talk about in detail in a week or 10 days. Your own level of self-worth and self-acceptance, which, as say a child, is really not well developed, to put it mildly. and your access to what meaning you generate from the event. What you make it mean about yourself, is where shame is. About the world would be, your beliefs about relationships, but about yourself is where shame comes in. And that really is determined by how internally validated you are. So those are, advanced self-esteem concepts, some of which are inspired by Dr. Nathaniel Brennan, many of which are fleshed out by me over the last 20 years, because it just seemed to be the key to everything. And no matter how much I try to get away from it, it just seems like, it all goes back there. So traumatic events, stuff that happened to you. Let's talk about these. The relationship between trauma and shame is, I think it's kind of funny. If it weren't so tragic, it'd be amusing. Something happens to us, or is done to us, and often we're very young, and we then make it mean something about ourselves that's disempowering. Now, a child is going to do something like that. A child is generally gaining their meaning from outside. A child is generally going to be externally validated. They're looking for approval or not, or at least looking to make sure they're not in trouble yet, right? And so that's going to happen. And then if anybody's doing anything that appears as disapproval, it's fine. I was speaking to this woman last night. It was just extraordinary what she was telling me, the lengths she went through to make sure her son never experienced shame, including when she was changing his diapers when he was a year old, never making a face at him, that was unpleasant about the smell or anything. Always make sure she was smiling at him, that everything was okay. And it's it's really led to a level of freedom. And she shared certain situations with me, which I won't share here, but this kid, he's 10 or 12, has this incredible level of freedom and comfort with himself around most aspects. And who knows, how much freer he'll be in 10 years when he has his own sense of self, and it's not about mom. Very few people are that conscious. I don't know anybody who's that conscious around their child when they're changing diapers. Conscious in other areas, absolutely. There are plenty of people who are incredibly intentional and conscientious and mindful parents. But facial expressions, that takes it to a whole new level. So, and the point is, a child could generate shame from that, could generate meaning, because they don't know what it means, and so they see a negative face and they then immediately associate with that. So it's easier than we think to generate shame in a 2-year-old. 2 to 6 is really where the very vulnerable formative years are for something like shame. Yeah. It does undercut our nascent and emerging sense of self, especially as you're defining yourself as not your parents, you're saying no a lot, or taking things from people. I don't know what you do, as we do, as children do. But the part of that's the stumbling blocks. It's like building blocks, but there's sort of the bull in a china shop. The stumbling blocks of an emergent sense of self, an emergent separate identity, and that gets undercut when we're shamed, because the expansion stops and there's contraction. So sometimes it's appropriate to limit some expansion if that expansion is, hitting another child in the face or stealing something from them, not giving it back, something like that. But shaming them is always and never will be necessary. It's just an unnecessary thing to do. You can have a conversation with them once they, reach a certain age. They understand consequences. Dr. Brandon wrote a book on self-esteem in children. He's written a book on self-esteem in almost everything. But self-esteem in children, one of the things, the first thing to do is to not punish them, but to have a conversation with them about consequences. And, if they behave a certain way, here's the consequences they get. And they're positive consequences. They actually can build positive consequences. And they lose some of that if they behave in a certain way when they break agreements. You have to make sure they're agreements. Anyway, it's good stuff. But, at this age, it undercuts any emerging sense of self when you're shamed. And so the self actually shrinks. It takes a long time to develop all those things. And, the truth is, shame and trauma can negatively impact for decades, all your relationships. It can impact areas that you didn't really see. They're not so obvious. It can impact your ability to ask for what you're worth, your relationship to money, because it is a self-worth issue. That sense of self has a self-worth component. And so you might be really clear about the value you're bringing, but you don't have enough self-worth to ask for a raise or to increase your rates, or to simply ask for, the money that that they already owe you. I've seen people get weird about invoices. They own the money, and they're for some reason shrunk in. Obviously, it can impact the level of fulfillment in your romantic relationships, your intimate relationships. I mentioned being able to be touched in certain areas. I actually knew somebody who there was very few places she could be touched, because she had been beaten and molested so much that there were just very few spots that didn't have an association to that, which made it, as you can imagine, very challenging for her. No surprise that for years she was a heroin addict, so that she didn't have to feel any of that. And wouldn't it be great if we could just clear that out in an hour? She could save all that money, or not. But and yes, we can. And then how comfortable they feel when they're alone. Why is this one important? I'm sure we've all seen somebody who was in a relationship they really shouldn't be in, and everybody was clear they shouldn't be in the relationship. They were in it because they were too afraid to be alone. Being alone was worse than being in a horrible relationship. And I don't want that for anybody. What I want for people is that they feel absolutely free, and they're joyous in their own company. They don't need anybody else for their own entertainment. As a side note, Dr. Nathaniel Brand keeps coming up. He said, he wrote somewhere that you're not fit for romantic love unless you're comfortable being alone. And I think that's true. I think it's certainly true that you're probably not going to find the right fit of romantic love if you're not comfortable being alone, because it'll just be, oh, who's right here? Proximity, the worst possible reason. There's a Bill Clinton joke in there, but I'm just not finding it this morning. So those are the reasons why we want to clear it out. And then, the other thing that impacts the other relationship with shame and trauma is we share it with our loved ones. And, I can't tell you how many times I've heard a woman say, she got molested or raped, and she shared it with her mother, and her mother didn't believe her. Or she shared it with her father, that it was the uncle, and he, spanked her for lying or something like that. And why would they do that? Why would they, other than that it would shake their perceptions of their spouse or their sibling or their cousin or whatever. It's because of their own shame, and really generations and generations of shame. It's ancestral shame that just travels down the timeline, from mother to fetus, with the chemical sets of shame. Gets passed on through the umbilicus. Certainly one way it can be passed on. And so when we clear shame out, it's really important that we get the very first event. Now we can also use the process I'm going to demonstrate to clear out specific events that you recall, but it's equally as effective if you don't remember the event. In fact, sometimes I think it's simpler. It's certainly easier, more rapid if you don't remember the event. We can just do it symbolically because of your internal representation of time. And so let's get to the mechanics of this. First, I'd just like to see if anybody has any questions at this point. I just went through a 23-minute monologue covering a wide range of things, from prison to the relationship between shame and trauma. Again, go ahead and use your chat. If you're trying to talk, I can't hear you unless you unmute yourself. But I would prefer, for lots of reasons, that you use the chat window. If you're on a telephone, obviously, go ahead and unmute yourself. No questions? There must be some questions.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm calling from my phone, so I can't type in.
Okay. Yeah. So,
but I just wanted to, wanted to ask if you would maybe make some notes of these books, so we could read after. I don't know if it's a connection or you're talking, but I couldn't get them down fast enough. So there's one book about liberation that I'd like to read, if you could.
Sure. It's
Okay.
the Ethics of Liberty.
The Ethics of Liberty. Okay, awesome.
By Dr. Murray Rothbard. Rothbard.
Oh, okay, awesome.
Some call him an economist. Some call him a philosopher. Some call him I believe he's Nobel Peace Prize winner or Nobel Prize winner of economics.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He's one of the, back when they actually thought that psychology and economics and liberty should all be one thing. There shall be one system because you can't take the human beings out of it. Anyway, very easy to read. He's brilliant and easy to read. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And to re-mute myself, is it pound 6?
I have no idea, so I'll do it for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments, observations, reactions? Okay. So how do we resolve it? Right? So we have these imprints and so we all have an unconscious organization of time. Some of you may be aware of it. Some of you may not be. Some of you may, once I said that, get a little present to it. And there's two general orientations. Oh, they're chanting over there. I wish I knew what they were chanting. I could join in. We could all join in, and then it'd be doubly funny. Okay, so there's two general orientations of time. One's called in time, and one's called through time. In time, the present is in your body, the future is generally in front of you, and the past is generally behind you. And you can hear people talk about looking towards the future or putting the past behind them, things like that. That language is pointing to a deeper structure. It's not just a colloquialism they picked up. And you'll see them gesture too. The other orientation through time, the past is on the left, present's in front of them, future's on the right. And you'll see them just motion to the past over here, or for you over here. And you can pick up on that. But notice yourself. So whether you're working with clients or whether you're just noticing yourself, I have a great story about my timeline being reversed, and it was a day of chaos. No, not really. It was 10 minutes of chaos. So we all have this unconscious organization of time. Those are the two general orientations. They, by the way, have different benefits. It used to be that the thinking was leave it alone because, you could cause incredible disorientation and the client might start being late to everything and, all sorts of other mayhem. And I found it's useful just to make sure that clients know what benefits each orientation has and give them the capacity to change it at will. So, through time where, the present's outside of your body, fantastic place to balance your checkbook, do financial tracking, look at, say, a traumatic event from, or be on, make sure you're early. And it's a terrible place to taste wine from or make love in or any of those things that really involve sensation or sensual experiences. That, reading poetry or writing poetry, that we want to leave for being in time. Now, in the Bay Area, I don't know how many of you are from the Bay Area. Ryan did a geography check last time, but in the Bay Area, there seems to be an overwhelming majority that is in time. The present's in their body, the future's in front of them, the past is behind them. It makes my job a lot easier because I would optimize it that way anyway. And some metaphors will bear out. The future is looking bright. Most people, if somebody's depressed, I simply list their timeline and ask them how far in the future they can see. And I'd be willing to, bet my last dollar that they can't see further than 3 months. Usually it's about 2 weeks, sometimes 3 days, if they're depressed, if they're actually, having trouble getting out of bed and not getting anything done. Then, it's largely because of the lack of a compelling future unconsciously. So I resolved clinical depression, well, I'm not a doctor and nor do I hold myself out to be, but I resolved clinical depression in a client just by, we spent about an hour and a half working on his timeline and really growing it in with, foliage and earthen paths, and really filling this whole thing in so that he had an incredible future he could walk towards and in. And then, gold bricks to line the earthen path. It's really great. And most of it, I didn't come up with that stuff. I asked him, in his unconscious mind, what it would look like if it were, compelling and, looking better and better. And all this, greenery came in. Before it was, by the way, this basically a crack in the earth, like desert canyon, it was very short and precipitous. So we filled it in first and grew all this wonderful stuff. For him, that was a relatively permanent change. A lot of people, if they're clinically depressed, it's not that simple. Just extending their future timeline out. It's a good way for them to manage their own mind. In the, like day to day, like you wake up and you go, oh, I feel like crap. Okay, how far in the future can I see? All right, I extend it out. It's a quick fix. Doesn't resolve the underlying issue though, typically. His was a wonderful example of it actually fully resolving it with your timeline. But clearing stuff from the past. This is the Swiss Army knife of how to clear your past. Whether that's imprints of fear, anger, guilt, shame, sadness, or traumatic events. So once you have your timeline, once you know your timeline, how it's oriented. Okay. Here's how a negative emotion gets created. You've all experienced a situation where maybe somebody does something and you don't say anything about it. It kind of bothers you, but don't say anything about it. And then they do it again and you still don't say anything. It bothers you a little bit more. And then about the 10th time, you explode on them. And it wasn't about the thing they just did. It was about the previous 10 things you didn't say anything about. And so it is with our nervous system with life. You come in and let's say, between the ages of first trimester and 6, you experience something. It could be a loud crash in the environment. It could be, if you're in the womb, it could be the chemical sets of shame or fear or whatever the emotion is. And then a similar event occurs, which reinforces the imprint and so on and so on. Until you have what we call a gestalt of fear or shame or whatever it may be. And then all that needs to happen is something a little bit similar to that event in the present, and it triggers off this whole gestalt, and you experience a disproportionate degree of that emotion. It's pretty simple, really. It's pretty straightforward. And again, we've all experienced this in a relationship with somebody where they did something, just let it go, and then it just increases and increases until there's this weird, and they go, "Gosh, what's wrong with you? What are you exploding for? I just got the wrong fork." And so what we do, how we resolve it, is we take you back in time. We elicit your unconscious organization time. We take you back in time to just prior to the very first event. A note on this is very critical that you get to the very first event, not the first thing you remember or the most powerful. A lot of people go for the most intense one. They're like, "Wow, this is a big one." Yeah, that doesn't matter. What matters is we get the root of the weed out. So it may be, less sensational. It may be less sexy, more sexy. I don't know. Or it may be, simply brighter on the timeline, or seems like the one you're drawn to. We really want to make sure we get the very first event. Now, I have gotten pretty good at being exhaustive with making sure we do that so that we don't have to do the process a second time. There's only 2 things that has this process not work, by the way, as effectively as we would like. And for me, effectively as we would like would be 70% or greater reduction in the whatever emotion it is that's causing them dis-ease in the body. And the primary one is there was an earlier event, so you didn't get it all. Another less frequent one is that there was an additional resource that needed to be added to the event, which is what we're doing right now in this stage in the presentation here. We're adding resources down into that very first event and resolving the emotional charge. We're actually having you reassociate into the event at that point. You've been dissociated so far so that you're not feeling the trauma a second time. One of the things I love about this process is you don't have to relive it. In fact, it's discouraged to resolve it. It actually has it be more problematic, more difficult if you're in it and reliving it. So if I can see you, I can tell by the way you're breathing, or your cheeks are flushing if you're sort of floating down into the event. We don't want that until the appropriate time. The appropriate time is once you've added all those incredible resources that would have you not feel the trauma, or have the trauma not affect you, or have the trauma even be positive or empowering. There's lots of things I've turned into positive and empowering, and those aren't just reframes. Those are authentic ways of relating to it. So then we bring you forward in time, and we have you imagine futures where in the past you would have felt, in this case, shame, but now you're more resourceful. And in this case, we'll say self-accepting, or fully accepting, or simply naive about how you could feel shame. Shame is actually a foreign thought to you. Okay. Most clients, by the way, at this point do report a 70% or greater reduction in the emotion. I have them track 4 key areas. One's duration. How long are you feeling it if it gets triggered? How intense, so intensity, how intensely do you feel it? Did you totally lose control? Did you have to take a time out? Did you almost crash your car? Whatever it may be. The other is frequency, how frequently it comes up. And the other one, of course, is ease of trigger, which I like to think of as how small of an issue triggered it. Was it really worth that? It's great if we get them all. Sometimes, there's one that makes it really obvious. It's like, well, I used to experience anxiety, 30 times a day, and I experienced it once, or twice this week. That one's pretty obvious. So, questions, comments, observations, reactions before we ask for a volunteer. Questions, comments, observations, reactions. No. I will interpret that as me completely nailing it. I'm sure you have questions after you see the process with your practitioner's mind. So who has either a traumatic event they would like to feel freedom around, and even feel gratitude that occurred, perhaps? Or maybe that's a stretch, but just consider it a possibility. Or they want to clear out shame or fear, but we want it to be in the context of sex and relationships. So, not asking for what you want because you're, terrified to express it or something like that. So a volunteer, or 2 or 3 that I can select from, the most appropriate one. This will be a very short call if there's no demo. Somebody be brave. I promise it won't hurt.
Hello.
Hi.
Okay, great. I was trying to unmute it before, but now it's finally unmuted. Okay, so I'll go.
Okay, tell me a little bit about the issue you'd like to resolve, so I have a sense.
Okay. So I have 2 in mind. I'm not sure which one is more.
Yeah. So tell me about both of them.
Okay. So the first one was when I was quite young. Must have been around like elementary school age or a little younger. And I had an experience where I went to my godmother's house, and she lived with her mother. And they lived in this apartment building in Uptown Manhattan where my grandmother lived. So we went to visit. It was myself, my mother, and we went inside her house. She's in this apartment. And my godmother's mother had this habit where she would grab at my penis, like just very like aggressively. She would just grab it and be like, those are mine, and or at my balls, and be like, oh, those are mine.
Wow.
And
Let me make sure.
yeah,
This is grandma?
no, my godmother or my god grandmother.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, great.
And I would always react to that, like even though I was a little like I was a child, but I remember always like, oh, it never sat right with me. I always felt this. I felt shame about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was one thing. Yeah. And
Good.
she did it more than once. Yeah, like in different occasions when I would go there. And I always felt this like, what they call it? I felt like I had no power to stop her from doing that. Like she would just do that. And I had no, yeah. And then later, years later, which is probably maybe 3 or 2 years ago, I had an experience with a friend of mine. She's like a lightweight bodybuilder. She's super tall. She's like an Amazonian.
Okay.
And muscular. And so I was working at this job at a community center. And I told her about it because she was my friend, that she could come there and get services and whatever. And one day, I think it was, she stayed. She was like, oh, are you leaving right away, to take the train? I was like, no, I'll probably stick around and finish up some stuff. And she kind of like insisted that she stay with me for a little bit before I leave. And I was like, all right, whatever. So everyone else left in the office. It was this huge loft space. And so we were talking or whatever. And before that, this guy who's a volunteer was talking with us three, and she made some comments during that conversation that were like, insinuating that she wanted to have sex. And I hadn't been having sex with her. I think I had like once or twice before, but that was like in the past, and I had gotten through different relationships, and I didn't want that with her anymore. So we were supposedly just friends, and but she out of nowhere, said that he noticed it. So he said, I'm going to leave this conversation. And then, a little while later, she asked about staying, and I didn't give any thoughts to it. But I had this feeling in my chest. And then later on, when everybody was gone, he started to bring up this thing about sex again. And I was like, okay, whatever. If you want to have sex, good for you. But I didn't understand that she was kind of like pushing me to have sex with her. And I was like, I don't want to have sex. And she was like, no, please. And then she started begging, and then she started getting forceful. And the next thing I know, I was pushed up against the one of these filing cabinets or something. And like I said, she can really hurt me because she knows martial arts and all kind of stuff. And she's way bigger than me. Right. And I was like, holy crap. Like, I'm being fucking pushed and forced right now. She's like, you're going to sex with me, woo-woo. And I ended up doing that. And it at that point when I remember when it was happening, I kind of blacked out. Yeah. And she got off or whatever, but I started to get limp at one point because I just didn't want to do it. Yeah. And then whatever, then I somehow got up again and finished, and then she was done. And I don't know. I hardly have talked to anyone about that, but yeah, those are the things that I've experienced that were kind of crazy.
Yeah. By the way, maybe you may be aware of the staggering numbers on rape in men, and of course, the massive underreporting, because even if you tell the cops, they laugh at you. When I left,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're like, oh, whatever. There's a website. It's called Interested Participant, and it just tracks women who, rape school-aged boys and their penalties, and they all get off really light. It's just a systemic thing. It's and it's not, like in the situations where the kid's like, yeah, I'm having sex with my hot English teacher. It's a situation where they, wanted it to stop. So.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Interested participant. I think there's a hyphen in it. I haven't looked at it, in a while, but it's one way to look at some of the interesting double standards around men and women and sexuality. Like we're supposed to be able to, perform all the time, and there's no way to rape a man, right? There's no. Okay, if you say so. Good. And let me just check in with the rest of the group and see if there's anyone else. I want to make sure I have the most appropriate issue for the exercise, or anyone else who has one that they've thought about resolving, either a specific traumatic event when they were young, in their formative years, or an emotion that keeps coming up in these kinds of situations. Or not. Okay. Going once, going twice. Sir, you win. Are you seated comfortably? Or can you be seated comfortably?
I'm getting there now.
Okay. And the system isn't giving me your name. What's your first name?
Sure. Houdini?
Houdini?
Yeah, seriously.
That's awesome. Okay, great.
Thank you.
Well, this will be a breeze then. You're going to get right out of this trap. So I'll just tell you where the hidden key is, and we're done.
That's right.
That's right. That, by the way, I can't teach you guys in the course. I'm sorry.
I love it.
Okay, good. Once you're seated comfortably, let me know.
Okay. I am almost there. Okay. Matter of fact, let me just do this. Okay. Inches. Okay, I'm ready.
Perfect. As you're seated comfortably, I want you to just imagine the future stretching out in front of you, and the present is in your body, the midsection of your body, and the past stretching out behind you in a line. And by the way, we're just going to skip about 10 or 15 minutes of what it takes to elicit a timeline, because it usually ends up this way anyway. So but just imagine the future is in front of you, present is in your body, or directly underneath your feet or your sit bones, and the past stretching out behind you. And if you knew, how's that line represented? Is it like a beam of light? Is it like a steel, like a steel girder in a building? Is it like an earthen path? How is that timeline represented for you? What form does it?
It's like a bar, like a silver grayish line bar.
Good. Perfect. Good. Not only do you, I'd like you to imagine you're sitting in a safe, comfortable, powerful chair. And if you knew, what kind of chair would that be?
It would be a throne-looking chair. It'd be very cushy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Good. And now go ahead and float up in the air. Float above the present. Way up in the air. Above the present, above the now. And then we're going to float back. Float back, making sure you float safely above the timeline at a safe distance, all the way back to just prior to the first time your grand godmother. What's her first name?
Oh, Houdini.
What's her first name?
My friend?
No, we're going to clear out the earlier one, the grand.
Oh, my great godmother.
Great godmother.
I don't remember her name, but she's
okay.
My great godmother.
You didn't stay in touch. Good. Okay. So flip back in your timeline to just prior to the very first time she reached out to grab you. And
Okay.
you may just see it as a crack on your timeline or a dark spot. You might see a movie of, you as a child down there, but make sure you're floating safely above the event, looking down the event, at least the mezzanine seats.
Okay.
And as you float safely above, float just to prior it occurring. Go ahead and rewind the movie back to that point. It hasn't quite happened yet. Maybe her shoulders just twitching to, reach out. Now, what resources were needed then? Or what do you need to learn or accept now to release all of that? Now, in this situation, the resources could have been qualities or characteristics she would embody that would have her not do that. Or that you would embody that would have you not care. Or that would have you draw a boundary and say, that's not okay. In whatever way that you needed to do that to have it stop. What resource? Yeah.
Like knowledge of self.
Yeah.
And self-confidence, assertiveness, and the ability to say no to what feels uncomfortable. The knowledge of intuition and gut instinct, of boundaries.
Good. What else?
So human rights, and the knowledge that even as a child, I'm privy to those. Self-protection.
Yeah, the most fundamental of rights.
Right.
Protecting your own body, yeah. Good. What else?
So I was taught by my mother growing up that I was always supposed to cater to her needs and whatever she wanted. So I would have needed the understanding of that not being true.
Okay. If that weren't true, what would be true? What would be the principle or
self-guidance?
Great. Yeah, good.
Self-awareness also. A sense of self-worth.
Yes. Good.
And knowing the value of courage. And knowing what that even is,
Yeah.
Because at that stage, I don't think I did.
Probably not.
Yeah.
It's the trouble. It's where we get in trouble with these things. There's no, there is no structure for it yet in our map of reality. So we just create an emotion instead because we can't make sense of it. Certainly, situation like this just makes zero sense especially to a child. Doesn't make sense to me either. Just to be clear. What else?
Like knowledge of, great segue for knowledge of like emotions and feelings, what they mean. And
you'd be surprised how many adults don't know what they're feeling, by the way.
That's so true.
Yeah, in lots of ways too.
Especially male.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. It goes the other way too. I recently had an extended experience with a woman who knew the sensation she was feeling, but didn't know what it was about for several months. So, all this sensation, but no meaning around it. And there was very specific, very clear meaning. It just took her several months to sort it out. So there's that, end of the spectrum. And then there's, you ask somebody how they feel about it, and they go, well, I think, there's no feeling words in anything that they said. That's the other end of the spectrum, and you have to say, no, it's down in your body. It's not up there up there somewhere. A great resource of just a list of emotional words on CNVC's website, the Center for Nonviolent Communication. And while, I haven't recommended much on that website to people, there's plenty of people I've said, look, here's a list of emotional words, and here's, the needs behind them. And those two things really help people a lot to know what they're feeling. So far we have knowledge of self, self-assertiveness, confidence, the ability to say no, boundaries, intuition, human rights. Even as a child, you have the rights to self-protection, self-guidance, self-awareness, sense of self-worth, knowing the value of courage and knowing even what that is, and knowledge of emotions and feelings. Is there anything else you would have needed to have the event, either dissolve, never happen, or have you, not care about it, have the ability to make sure it never happened again?
The understanding or awareness that I'm verbose, as you can tell. So there's this thing of that I've adopted in this stage of my life of whatever we do, in essence, it doesn't matter. Whether we say yes or no to anything, in the grand scheme of things, it does, and it's okay, whatever we choose, because it doesn't have, there's no wrong or right is what I've been adopting in my life lately. There's a freedom to just be who you are and express that and then choose based on your gut and guidance. So being able to have that kind of awareness, to know that even if I say no and people around me, her and whoever around me would have had a problem with that, it
Sure.
doesn't matter, because that was my truth. So I guess the sense of my truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the piece about internal validation there too. If we're validated outside of ourselves, if somebody gets upset when we say no, then we waffle on the no. We waffle on the boundary because we're afraid that they won't like us, and that means that we're fundamentally invalid because we're getting all of our validity through them, right?
Yes.
Which is interesting. So internal validation. What else? Self-empowerment. Good. What else?
Self-esteem.
Yeah.
I feel like I thought you actually talked a little bit about that in the first call, about there's a difference between worth and self-esteem or something like that.
Yeah, we're getting into in detail in the next call. I covered it briefly in the first call.
Yeah.
And, just to sort of lay the groundwork, but it will really be, most of the next call will be about self-esteem and building, building new habits. So yeah, it's the thing we can't get away from. So
Awesome.
Wherever we are, there's our opinion of ourselves.
Yes.
Can't escape it. Like your breath, we're there all the time. What else?
Okay.
We have knowledge of self, self-esteem, self-assertiveness, self-awareness, self-worth, and self-guidance. Confidence, the ability to say no and boundaries. Intuition, human rights, even as a child, the right to self-protection. Knowing the value of courage and knowing what that is. Knowledge of emotions and feelings. And being able to speak your truth regardless if they're upset. Internal validation and self-empowerment. Is there any other resources you would have needed to dissolve all the trust?
Yeah.
Right. What else?
Peace.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay. Great. So as you float safely above this event in your throne, just prior to the event, just imagine yourself at a safe distance. And can you see what's happening down there, or is it just symbolic?
No, I can. Yeah, I can feel it.
Okay, great. So make sure you're staying floating safely above. If you have trouble, because I can't see you, if you have trouble, let me know that you're being pulled down into the event if that happens. If not, that's
Okay.
if not, that's great. If it does happen, we have structures we'll put in place to make sure that you stay above the event until we're ready.
I can visually in my mind's eye see. Yeah.
Good. So we're going to add these resources as I name them, and you're going to add them down into the event, and you can imagine, laser beams injecting the event with the resource, or dropping a beautifully wrapped present down into the event for your younger self to receive. Fairy dust, if you like that kind of thing, or glitter, or whatever it is perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah. First, knowledge of self. Go ahead and add knowledge of self. Fully infusing the event with knowledge of self. Let me know when that's complete.
Okay.
Great. This is self-esteem. Self-esteem. Transmit self-esteem down into the event. Let me know when that's complete.
Okay. Got it.
Good. Self-assertiveness. Self-assertiveness.
So what did we say about self-assuredness?
Self-assertiveness. I think self-assertiveness goes along with saying no.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's my sense.
Okay. That feels good. Yeah.
Good. Good.
Yeah. It connects with another. I was just going to say that it connects with something else that I experienced later. So I was able to, it was tangible. And that felt great.
Good.
Yeah.
Next is self-awareness. Self-awareness. Floating safely above the event.
Okay.
Looking down the event. And self-awareness.
That is really, yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
And with that self-awareness, self-guidance. Self-guidance.
I just got a realization that there were times when I would vibrate on that and it was just misunderstood as a child when I would do that. The adults around me didn't, it would rattle them a little bit that I would vibrate off that as we're so young. So
Sure.
that's very healing. That's very healing.
Good. Good.
Yeah. I always had that. I mean, I'm reconnecting with that now as we're going through this exercise. Yeah. Wow. Done. Yeah.
A sense of self-worth. A sense of self-worth.
So you get really close by being like, you're just like, all of a sudden you're just standing here. We're open, but we're kind of giving in to us. Okay. In fact,
So there was so much tension between my parent and I, my mother raising me, that was lost. That sense of self-worth. I'm trying to connect with that, and it's a little challenging.
Okay. For now, you mean it's challenging to connect with the self-worth, or?
Yeah. It's,
okay. Yeah. If you were to represent self-worth, strong self-worth in some fashion, with some symbol, what would that symbol be?
It would be
It could be anything from a steel beam to a gem to something weird, came up like a unicorn, or not the unicorns.
It would be a gem. Yeah, it would be a gem.
What color is it?
It's white.
Great. So take that gem and just drop it down into the event. Allowing its facets to shine its resources through all of whatever's happening in the event. And make sure you're floating safely above the event.
I'm wearing it like a necklace.
Great.
Yeah, that feels great, and I'm able to. And it explains why I used to see my cousins with. I used to be drawn to their jewelry, and even when I did have a few jewelry that my family gave me, it always felt so good. I felt the worth. I was worthy of this treasure. So thank you. Okay.
Yeah. By the way, self-worth. Because there's been. I'll tease you with the next one. The next webinar by self-esteem is the most used and least well understood distinction in popular psychology. But one of the ways of thinking about self-worth is just that you feel worthy of receiving, good things. Not that you feel you're entitled to them, but that you're comfortable receiving them. So that could be a fulfilling relationship, or it could be somebody who wants to buy you lunch or offer you help when you need it. All those things.
Wow, that explains why I struggle with that as an adult. Yeah. Thank you.
So far.
Yeah, that's fair now. Yeah.
And next is internal validation. Add internal validation down into the event. Let me know when that's complete.
So that's the whole thing around it doesn't matter. It's not really long. It's just what I choose.
Yeah, it goes with speaking of truth. There's lots of ways to talk about it. I would say though that you make decisions for you, not for others. Is one way to say it. So
say it one more time.
Yeah, you're making decisions based on what's best for you.
Yeah.
not based on what other people want or more importantly, to avoid what people will be upset by. This is actually a huge one for men with women that doesn't get talked about a lot, but we just don't want them to be upset. So because we don't know how to deal with their upset, or some men don't know how to deal with their upset. And so, we end up losing our center, which, causes other problems because it simply makes us less attractive to them. But particularly with women in authority, like the situation you had, being internally validated is a really powerful resource and something that was almost by the nature of things going to be lacking. And we want everyone really to be internally validated, but externally referenced, so they're still paying attention for results. So, the social awareness, but internal validation. So you're mindful of results, but it's not a personal matter, it's a practical matter. But now I'm teasing too much on the next one. So internal validation, and self-empowerment. Add those two, and let me know when that's complete.
It's interesting. I'm imagining like a scepter in my hand on this self-empowerment.
Good.
Yeah, that's allowing me to. Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Confidence is next. Confidence. Confidence.
Yeah.
Good.
I got it.
Boundaries and the ability to say no. Boundaries and the ability to say no.
Got it. Now that felt easier after the prior three that we did.
Yeah, sometimes I resequence them for that reason. Sometimes there's one that, somebody said first, it's just going to be way too hard for them to swallow without laying the groundwork.
Okay.
Like self-acceptance before, self-empowerment, that kind of thing. So intuition, we're going to add intuition. Add intuition. Let me know when that's complete.
So,
yeah,
intuition is something that even lately I've struggled with, and I realize in this moment it's because it's attached to a feeling a lot of times, and growing up, my feelings were not validated.
Right.
So yeah, it was always about the other.
Yeah.
The other was my mother, and then my father later on. So I noticed that I have this reaction to when, like, for example, a lover will ask me, what's your schedule? What are you going to do? Or whatever. And I'll be like, because intuitively I feel what's going to happen or not, but I won't dare say that. Oh, I don't feel like this is going to happen. So no. Because I feel like that will not be met with acceptance or respect, or it won't be honored. It won't be taken seriously.
No, much displeasure will be demonstrated.
There will be a force
Yes.
Yeah.
They will be most displeased.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you need to be able to add intuition into this event and way back then that you're floating above?
Right. Thank you. Need need to fully integrate the self-confidence.
Great.
Yeah.
So go ahead and, as you float safely above the event, allow whatever remaining integration needs to occur with self-confidence. Allow that to occur now. And just notice the ways in which the event is shifting and changing as you integrate self-confidence.
Your brain not tell the difference between something that's actually happening and something that is your brain.
Now, what are you experiencing right
Wow.
now? Okay, great. Sounds good.
Yeah. So I was seeing how the connection was with my mother specifically. There was this relationship of codependency. So as a child, I needed her to assist me with my needs being met, and there was needs that she was having met that she would kind of force me to meet certain needs for her, while not, of course, vocalizing that.
Right.
So the whole thing was this power play. You need me. Meanwhile, you will do this, you will do that, and me not realizing that that's what she was gaining from it is her needs that she wanted met.
Yeah.
So now I realize now I feel confident understanding that. That's why even as an adult now, when I call her, she thanks me because there's something that she receives from that.
Sure.
Yeah. And she always has. She just never could say that to me. Yeah, because she always saw my gifts, and she always would pull from that. Yeah.
Good insight.
Yeah, so I feel more self-confident now.
Good. The ability to say no and intuition, or intuition and trusting that and saying no.
That feels like a beam of light going right through me as in the child.
Sounds
right,
good.
like striking the child almost like a lightning bolt or a beam of light.
Excellent. Good.
Yeah. Powering. Yeah.
Trust. And trust.
Yeah. I'm still feeling it. Like I see myself as a child looking around and almost waiting for the ball to drop, but then always seeing that things always did work out, and that even the toughest situations.
They do. Oddly.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yes.
Sometimes eventually is longer than others, but eventually it all.
Right.
I have yet to have any evidence to the contrary, to be honest.
Say it again?
I have yet to have any evidence to the contrary.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Always works out fine.
Yeah, that feels fully integrated. Yes. Thank you.
Human rights, even as a child, this right of self-protection. Good.
Yes.
Good. Knowledge of emotions and feelings. Knowledge of emotions and feelings.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Good. Speaking your truth regardless of their upset. Speaking your truth regardless of their upset. Go ahead and add that. Orientation, that commitment, really. It's a commitment to yourself. Speaking your truth regardless of their upset.
I'm hesitant a little bit there, and
Yeah.
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 And what I could see is where both with my mother and my father that was one of the issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you receive any support from them financially?
Currently or back?
Currently.
Oh, no.
Okay. Are you dependent on them for anything else?
No, not dependent. No.
Good. Good. Good.
Yeah.
Then you have the option to tell the truth. Not that I encourage not speaking. They agree. Not that I'm saying you shouldn't speak your truth, but it means that you need to make sure that you're, get other things handled and in place so that you're not just whatever. I've seen people take that. You have to take it in the larger context. Also, there's a difference between speaking your truth and just being a jerk. We want to make sure you're not being a jerk, but you are saying what's authentically true for you. In fact, I saw one of those Bay Area translation things, and it's speaking of truth. It said something like, being a jerk, and they can't say anything about it. So, well, I'm just speaking my truth. That's not what we mean. We mean not stuffing stuff that you need to express, right?
Right.
I have that relationships only improve from telling the truth. Especially intimate relationships, even if it means that you got clearer sooner than you would have that it's not a fit. That is a positive result, I think. With your parents, they may be upset for a while. They may not even talk to you for a week or two. But remember, everything works out eventually. And so will they.
So you're reminding me that there was, when I thought about that question, so my father has a relationship with his grandchildren. Two of them are mine. They're young, 8 and 7 years old. I live in New York. He lives in Florida. The kids live in Alabama with my cousin. That is his cousin. And the long and short is that the lack of contact or access to how they're doing was actually being taken care of through him, because through him I was knowing how they were doing up until most recently. So that there was, up until most recently, it was this thing that I still was needing him for something, and now I don't.
That was actually a big deal.
Yeah.
The other thing you have to factor in, you'll just learn this over time, is their capacity to hear the truth. And if you reach a point where, and you by the way, you never want to rob them of personal development opportunities. So, you do want to, and not telling them the truth does rob them of that option to really show up and shine. And they might surprise you. They might surprise you with capacities you didn't know that they had. And you want to be careful about confirmation bias, even if, they get upset. You don't want to go, see, I knew it, and you start to see all of that evidence. Make sure you test it a few times, see how they handle it, and continue to, test. You're not testing them, but you're verifying your interpretation. You want to be really cautious about interpreting that people can't handle something, so you stop doing it. Maybe they just had a bad day. Maybe they had or maybe they can't handle it and they don't want to develop the capacity. And that's fine too. It just means that you can't have certain conversations with them, and to do otherwise would be unjust in a way. It's a sad day. I've seen a lot of people experience it, when you can't, when their eyes go flat when you reach a certain level of depth, that point, because they don't want to deal with it. But in this case, we're just going to test it by you speaking your truth. Go ahead and shoot that down there into the event. Let me know when that's complete. Speaking your truth. I'm going to add authentically and responsibly. And even if that just means...
Oh, yeah, that did it. That did it.
Even if that just means a nice tone of voice.
It's like I saw something shoot from my feet all the way up through the top of my head, and it was like a wave of energy, and it totally radiated through my core, and I see myself like there's a difference now in my whole being.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Next is knowing the value of courage, knowing what that is. Knowing the value of courage. And knowing what courage is.
Wow, I see like this darkness, and I think that's representative of how I didn't know what courage is.
Okay. And finally, peace. Peace. Peace.
Yes. Yeah,
Great.
got it.
As you float safely above this event, having added all of these resources, knowledge of self and self-esteem, self-assertiveness, self-awareness, self-guidance, a sense of self-worth, represented by the white gem, internal validation, self-empowerment, confidence, the ability to say no, intuition, trust, human rights, even as a child, the right of self-protection, knowledge of emotions and feelings, speaking your truth regardless of the outcome, regardless of their upset, doing it responsibly and wisely, of course, and knowing the value of courage, knowing what that is, all wrapped in peace. Having added all those resources to that event, go ahead and float down into the event and reassociate into your younger self, noticing the shifts in how the event goes down and what you make it mean, even if it goes down the same way. Once you've noticed those differences, and it could be, that the wallpaper is different, or it could be that you're, saying no and making it clear that, there will be no more of that in the future. Could be you smacking her wrist before she even reaches it. However, it would be appropriate for you.
I see like these strong colors, orange and black, and I do see myself once it's over, viewing it completely different and it being an empowering experience as opposed to one that feels disabling.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. The first time you learn to draw boundaries. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Good. Go ahead and flip back above the event.
Okay.
And then, Houdini, we're going to create a symbol, an object that represents all of these resources and this event no longer having any power. It's just neutral and empowering, in fact. What is that symbol?
The symbol actually that's coming to mind is a tiger.
Okay, good. Good. I've heard it all, so don't worry about it.
Awesome.
You would not believe some of the symbols that pop into people's head. Many of which I cannot say here in case there's anyone under 18 who is listening. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, there's comedic timing. It's not a joke. Good. So take that symbol, that tiger. Go ahead and drop that tiger down onto your timeline and allow it to move forward in time, clearing away all the subsequent events where she engaged in the same behavior. Maybe it's batting them off the timeline with its huge paw, or maybe it's chasing them away as it moves up your timeline, all the way up to the present, all the way up to now. Let me know one. Yeah, good. Good.
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like you to begin to imagine futures. Futures where in the past you might have not expressed yourself. And if we look at all of these resources, most of them are about expressing something about, or they'll assist in that. Self-esteem, self-assertiveness, self-guidance. All those things are internal validation, empowerment, confidence, saying no, knowledge of emotions and feelings, and speaking your truth. And they're all really about expressing yourself. So see yourself in situations where you would have either suppressed yourself and not said anything, or you altered what you knew you should do to make someone happy at the cost of your own happiness. See at least 3 of those scenarios. And it could be as simple as saying no to somebody who wants to borrow money, or who knows. Once you've seen at least 3 of those scenarios, let me know. Once you're seeing exhibiting new resources.
Okay, got him.
Great. You're going to float down into the present, reassociate to the present, reorient yourself to the room. Let me peek outside this door. They may be on a lunch break, which would be fascinating. Hang on. I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Welcome back.
Okay. Okay.
At least I can hear you now. I don't know if you guys can hear all that noise, but
We can.
got it. Yeah, they're having a good old time. Okay. So questions for me about the process, or questions for Houdini about his experience. And feel free to use the chat window. And thanks for sticking with me through that, to everybody. So questions for him about his experience, or questions for me about the process? They're all stunned into silence. Yes. So first, yeah, I'll write that question down there. I'll actually send it out to you guys. It's a future-pacing question. It's really important. I think you asked me last time why I asked it. We need to have them build into their self-concept in the future that they'll be behaving in different ways. Otherwise, they just rely back on the habit. It's just like an Olympic athlete imagining themselves winning the gold medal. Jim, why didn't you involve sending resources to the godmother? I actually offered that in the beginning. I said, resources that he would have needed to not matter, or the godmother would have needed for it to have never happened. But what came out of him was all of his own internal resources. And, I never dissuade anybody from having all the resources be internally based. So that was what was behind that. But I did mention it, and I didn't pursue it because I thought it would be fine. And really, I think it's better to learn how to draw a boundary than to never deal with the situation in the first place. That could be a personal philosophical preference, but he builds capacities he wouldn't have had if she just never did it. Does that make sense? Yeah. And it's really him. He chose that route. I think it's a great route. Any other questions about the process for me or Houdini's experience? Okay. Any questions for Houdini before I let him go back to his present? He's already in his present, but okay. Well, Houdini, thank you so much for your willingness. It was a great demonstration of all the resources really that you gathered there, the courage and the self-assurance, all of it really. So thank you, and thanks for showing up. It's really a great. Jim wants to know what was the main transformation for you?
Actually seeing myself say no.
Great.
Because in my head, it's one thing to be like, yeah, I should be able to say no. But it was something transformative to feel it, to shift it, to see it, and then to know, like in my heart, to know that from this point forward, this is what I'm actually going to be actually, expressing more of and embodying and actually integrating that into my life.
Good. They may need an adjustment period, by the way.
Say that again?
They may need an adjustment period, if you're
right. Thank you for that.
Wait a minute. You're not. This isn't you. What's going on? Because I'm in San Francisco, I used to have clients do all sorts of funny things that I don't do so much anymore. But one of them is, link arms and skip down Market Street. By the way, it's impossible for somebody to skip and not smile. Try it.
Wow. Because, yeah, as soon as you said that, I imagined smiling.
You're ridiculous. Well, I can do it, but I'm well practiced. But, you link arms with anybody and start skipping, and they're going to start giggling. I don't care how depressed they are. Now, they might go right back to their depression in 10 minutes, but for that block. But the other thing is around boundaries, because you're offer the opportunity to contribute to panhandlers on every corner. And most people just ignore them, which I find both dehumanizing, but also just, we could call it all sorts of things. I'm not saying to give them money, by the way. I'm just saying, to look them in the eye and say, no, thank you. And that was a practice I, not only did myself for a long time, but it's also
you can't go. Are you doing
a lot of clients
I don't know.
Benefit from the benefits.
Probably,
by the way, of doing a scenario like
I don't
that,
know when.
is you may never see the person again.
It's there's two things I'm doing
heavy consequences
right now. One is to give you guys
and you got
all
to
the
have
business tools you need
drawing a boundary
to make sure that you're prospering,
being courageous by
from what you're doing,
and they
you're
feel
gonna
like
see
they're
stuff coming
treated
out
like
pretty soon. It's really all about how to build a sustainable.
Everybody really wins. Just from saying no thank you to it.
Sustainability of change for clients, sustainability of finances for you. Make sure you
occasionally
all
get a
have
smart one who
six-figure
goes, "I wasn't
practices.
offering
That'll be coming soon.
Right.
And
It's only happened to me 3 times.
And the other thing, though, is to
I
give you
usually applaud
transformative
them.
tools for your clients so that you're just being much more effective with them. They're the value that
Okay,
they
good.
receive from
Any
you
other
is
questions
increased,
for him before
and
I
you're
go?
able to just heal them faster. I've known a lot of practitioners who are
Okay, thank you again,
dealing
sir.
with for weeks or months.
All right,
the
thank
same
you
kind
so
of
much.
emotional issue
Yeah.
with their clients, and
Very
a
welcome.
lot of it is just
All right.
there's straight coaching, which I think the word coaching is terrible. It's
So,
from the side,
if there's
hold
no
them
questions about
accountable.
the
It's like they're supposed
process,
to
I'll
feel a
drop
different
into
way
the
or something.
course,
Can't really do that.
and
They
then
really have to be
and then we'll
passionate,
talk about what's
spacious
available
healers,
to you,
or
and
they
then
think
we'll
it
go.
has to be something cathartic.
By
They
that I
have
mean
to go
the
to the beach
bribe
and
for staying
yell
on.
at the university. Whatever.
The Sexual Healers Toolbox is in person in San Francisco.
And I would just want to give you tools that
and
will have you be much more effective as healers.
It's
So both things are happening. So this will
there'll be everything that you've
happen
seen in
again.
these webinars, but I'll
Whether it
actually
happens
teach
again,
it to you so that
you know,
you can do it with clients.
It
You'll
probably
leave
won't be
with skill,
soon because all the attention will be
not
on
just
the.
a book or another
I'll say
set of
within a year,
worksheets, but
It'll
you'll
probably
leave
happen
with
again within a
some.
year.
You'll feel
So
relatively
I don't have a
competent.
better
You might
answer
still
for
need
you.
sheets to work off of because there's language involved. It's been
Will
honed
there be
over the
recording
years,
for Saturday?
you'll feel
Yes.
reasonably
If you register
competent
for the
to
call,
navigate that. And of course
you'll get a
go immediately
recording.
practice it with
How do you
clients,
register for
you'll
the
get
call? Don't worry about that. You'll get an
there'll
email
be
from me if you
the
registered for this
2
call,
that
which
I've
you
demonstrated
all
so far.
did,
Program
because you're
putting
here.
in,
I will
tunneling,
send you
carrying,
an email about how to register for the next call. If you
a
register
large
for the next
self-esteem
call,
component,
you will
and
get a
the
recording
chain
if
of
you couldn't be
meaning,
on the
which is
call. And it will be
practice
video
I've developed
and
for people
audio,
to-
and MP4 and MP3.
shame, any of the atmospheres like shame, hopelessness,
Any other
despair,
questions?
the heavy, dense ones, I call them atmospheres, rather than an emotional reaction. It's an emotional atmosphere. It's sort of like a
Address
cloud
again.
around you. You can feel it when you walk into the room, and sort of
.evolveco.com.
who in here is feeling hopeless? It's one of those metaphor I like to use. I'm not sure it's a good metaphor, but it's the kid from Peanuts, with the cloud around him. I think it's Pigpen, or I forget who. Anyway, the cloud. That's how I relate to emotional atmospheres. They just sort of follow you around. This practice serves incredibly well for that. And it can be any kind of situation, anything where there is an event that occurs, which could be anything. It could be even you having a thought could be an event. Generally, we mean with other people, especially when there's no information, or you did something and it leads through a sequence of things. So we're going to hack that so you have access to it. The only thing you don't have access to changing, by the way, is the actual event that occurred. And we could argue that too, but I don't want to get into the metaphysical debate on it. We're going to say, for the purposes of learning the exercise, that's static. And also core transformation, which won't be demonstrated in the webinars, I don't think. I don't think I'll be doing a 4th one with new material. Some of you may be familiar with that process. I consider it, the deepest, it's one of 2 spiritual practices I recommend, by the way. One's Vipassana meditation. The other is doing core transformations on yourself. And it gets you to your core state. You take any problem and, essentially take it to God, whatever God means for you. That could mean peace. It could be the universe. It could be okayness. And it's the thing I use if nothing else has been as effective as we like. You know, there's some part of them that's hooked onto something. All of them, except for core transformation, are highly modified, or the chain of meaning is created by me. The others are highly modified versions of processes that are available in NLP practitioner training or master practitioner training for the most part. My thinking around it obviously is not necessarily. That comes with being familiar with the integral community. So that's what you get. You leave with some skill. You'll be able to move your clients through, especially if you're dealing with sexual trauma, much more rapidly than you have before. I consistently get clients. I have this new client in Israel, and we just did our first piece of work like I just did with Houdini. And her whole life was transformed the following week. We cleared out fear. Oh my God. This woman's on fire. All sorts of things, opened up, and she went on adventures, and I mean real adventures. Like, I won't say too much about it, but it was really, I was actually surprised. But she kept saying over and over again that it was magical. It was like magic. And that's really what the experience, we want it to seem like it's magic and it's easy. It's not, of course, magic. It's, grounded in the structure of your subjective experience, which is what that whole field is about, studying that structure. But you got a whole lot more than that. It's 2 full days, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's $225 for the whole weekend. I don't know why. It's pretty cheap. Mostly I wanted you, if you could work logistics out, to think that you would be foolish to choose otherwise. So if you stayed on the call, by the way, here's the website for it, sex.evolveco.com, evolve-co. First 2 people who sign up from this call get a free 30-minute call with me just to troubleshoot your practice or anything that's going on with your clients, or anything you want really. But the idea is that most of you are probably practitioners, and I teach people how to build their practice, and I can often troubleshoot the reason you're not making the income you like, or the consistency that you would like. And a lot of you know Ryan Orach. Triamica has been one of my favorite clients to work with. Des and Garrick, produce great results very rapidly in their businesses. So something to consider. First 2 people to sign up, and that's your the bribe is complete now. You can choose to accept it or not. Any questions about anything so far before I thank you for your time and the opportunity to contribute to you? Oh, it sounds like somebody unmuting themselves. Here we go. Da-da-da. Go ahead. Or not. You don't have to talk. But okay. If there's no questions, I'm going to go ahead and, I'll just do it.
I have one.
Oh, okay, great. What's your question?
Yeah, so my question is, in your training actually in December, do you cover NLP along with, is that a combination of the work that you do?
Well, the processes are, highly modified versions of NLP processes, except for core transformation, which I'm told is pretty much textbook. I haven't looked at it in 15 years. The rest are, highly modified versions of NLP processes that are out there just from different sources here and there. NLP is the study of the structure of your subjective experience. That's what NLP is. A lot of people have different ideas about what NLP is. That's what it is. And it just depends on which areas of human experience people have decided to model out. There's a heavy therapeutic component. There's an emerging, I've certainly tried to contribute to this, the business structures, like what structures work in our particular business as healers and practitioners. As, sales from, say, real estate doesn't really translate so well. Or an online business in one vertical versus, our online business. doesn't work quite as directly. So I don't know if that answers your question. Am I going to go into teaching NLP, like how to model out experience? No, we just don't have enough time. 2 days to have you leave with some skills. I'll tell you what you need to know to demystify it. We'll talk about your unconscious organizational time a little bit deeper. We'll talk about parts so you understand parts so that you can do core transformation. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Mariko Passion. I think I got your name finally. Both your clients were great. What are other scenarios where they aren't so great? They can't visualize symbols or they are more resistant. Okay, brace yourself for this answer. There's no such thing as a resistant client. There's only unresourceful or unskilled practitioners. Now, that's not true. You can take on that, this person is resistant. You don't want to work with that. You could also just look at it as a rapport issue. You don't have enough rapport. They don't trust you enough. That's your responsibility. You could also look at it as a parts issue. There's a part of them that is resistant, but there's a part of them that isn't. So, they're there, right? There's a presupposition that they're there, unless they just like spending money for things that they're not getting results from. But I would assert that there's an internal conflict going on. So you look there. In terms of visualizing symbols, rarely do I have somebody say they can't visualize a symbol. Usually, sometimes they don't want to tell me what it is. And I just have to assure them before they express it. It doesn't matter. I've seen all sorts of things, and I give them a couple of examples, and then they feel completely free to express it. For people who say they can't visualize, period, that one's trickier. First of all, it's a skill. It's a muscle. So navigating your interiors is like building muscles, so that you have to exercise it. But for them, I usually just do something like this, which everybody. I'm not sure how much they like it, but I say, great. In my hand is an apple. What color is it? And they go, red. I go, does it have a stem on it? And they go, no. Is there a shiny spot? Yeah, it's right there. But they can't visualize. So, part of it is they just have a belief about it. I met a guy who all his predicates, all the language he was using were hypervisual predicates, but he couldn't see anything. Turns out, it took him a while, it took him about a year, but it turns out it was moving so rapidly. So he had to actually slow down his internal imagery because it was happening so fast he couldn't actually see it. It's an interesting problem to have. But the general orientation is Mariko's, that there's no such thing as a resistant client. And what that does is orient you to find a way. It's like, well, I'll try it from this direction. I'll try it from that direction. You want to make sure that you have enough artistry. And I'll use a martial arts metaphor here. You want to use Aikido, not Taekwondo, with your clients. And hopefully that metaphor translates. I think that's a great metaphor. You want to take their energy and propel them in the direction that they said they wanted to go, not the direction they're going, in terms of their outcomes, right? It's all in service of them rather than just, blocking them and going toe-to-toe with them. So it's a general way I relate to most interactions, whether it's the sales process or whether it's, with a client. If I can sit next to them instead of across the table from them, I do. Little things like that help those situations. Yeah. Thanks. Great question, Mariko. That's a great question, actually. Appreciate that. There's funnier answers, but I'm not going to do it because people don't know. Any other questions? Any other questions or comments or observations or reactions? Recommendations for sushi? No, there's no early registration discount. First of all, it's cheap enough. And second of all, my experience over the last 10 years is that virtually nobody takes advantage of them. So I've taken the administrative overhead out of doing that and just, price it how I want to price it, and that's it. So, but there is, those 2 free things. So I would snatch one. And with that, thank you for your time, for your focus. Really appreciate it. And thank you for allowing me the opportunity to contribute to you. And have a world-class weekend.
You too, sir. Thank you.
Thanks. Mm-hmm.